Hello, this is Paul Bergin from the Mars Hill blog. You can find me at www.paulbergin, that's P-A-U-L, that's www.paulbergin, that's P-A-U-L-B-U-R-G-I-N, .blogspot.co.uk. And I'm continuing a series of vlogs of political heroes of mine who I think helped change society for the better. And today I'm talking about Denis Healey, who is perhaps one of the most remarkable figures in British politics in the latter part of the 20th century. And he was born in 1917. His father was a lecturer. He was from Yorkshire, and he was pretty much involved in politics at Oxford. He was involved in a by-election against Quintin Hogg as part of a coalition. He was communist at the time, and the by-election was over the appeasement policies of Neville Chamberlain. During the war, he had a good record. He was a major, and he helped lead the charge at Anzio under heavy fire. And after the war, he failed to be elected to Parliament in the 1945 general election. But he got a job at Transport House at the Labour HQ, where his job was coordinating with other socialist parties abroad, not least in West Germany, or what became West Germany. And it gave Healey a sense of coordination and knowledge of however parties and structures functioned. He got elected to Parliament from one of the Leeds constituencies in 1952, and he grew through the ranks of the Labour Party and was an acolyte of Hugh Gaitskell's. He was in the Foreign Affairs team alongside Nye Bevan in the 50s, and then became Shadow Colonial and Commonwealth Secretary, Shadow Defence Secretary, and from the Wilson government of 64 to 70, he was Defence Secretary, and he was involved in our withdrawal of Aden and various events such as that, and perhaps helped keep us out of the Vietnam War. In opposition from 70 to 74, he was Shadow Foreign Secretary, but he was an agnostic on Europe. But I think that personal feeling, plus knowing what how Labour Party felt, but knowing how the country felt, meant that he changed his position about 3 times, and it led him to the accusation of opportunism, which was not thrown at Tony Benn, who was becoming increasingly agnostic about Europe and who wanted to call a referendum, and Roy Jenkins, who was always pro-Europe and led a rebellion of 69 Labour MPs to vote with the government to join the EC in 1971. When Jenkins resigned as deputy leader, and Shadow Chancellor, Healey succeeded Jenkins' Shadow Chancellor. He therefore became Chancellor of the Exchequer in the 74 to 79 Labour government of Wilson and then Callaghan. He stood for the leadership in 76, but he had had a row over the vote on Sterling on March the 10th, and he ended up having a very unpleasant row with some Labour MPs. 6 days later, Wilson resigned. Healey put himself forward. Many were not in a mood to vote for him. He got 30 votes in the first round, 38 votes in the second. Somehow he handled economics Chancellor. It didn't initially go well, but when the IMF crisis happened, when we needed to sort out our balance of payments, when we needed to get a loan from the IMF, Healey put forward a case that we had no alternative but to have cuts, no realistic alternative. Crossland took the view that you needed to call the IMF's bluff because they would not walk away from it. They would not carry out any threats. Tony Benn argued for a siege economy, which would have turned Britain into a permanent economic breadbasket case. But Healey managed to persuade the cabinet and the party to an extent that these cuts were needed. Unfortunately, they led to the strikes around the winter of discontent and the downfall of the Labour government, but I think in the long term Healey helped preserve the British economy. When the Labour government fell in 1979, Callaghan didn't immediately resign. But when he did quit in 1980, Healey stood for the leadership. But Healey had an inability to suffer fools gladly, and many in the Labour Party, not least Clive Jenkins, one of the leading union officials, took umbrage at Healey and had a personal dislike of him. And there was this Stop Healey campaign, and they got Michael Foot to stand. And Michael Foot has had many admirable qualities, but leadership was not really among them. And the Hard Left saw him as a stopgap. And Foot won by 10 votes. But because of Foot having been deputy and understood for deputy leadership, Healey was put forward as deputy. By default, no one challenged him. He was deputy leader. It meant that when the SDP happened, and I think it's great fault that Healey was not leader, there would have been less of a deluge towards the SDP when it was founded, and there would have been more of a fight back at the beginning. But Healey, as deputy leader, was something the Hard Left were not prepared to tolerate. Ben Studd announced he would stand against him in April 1981. And Healey campaigned hard for a job that he didn't want and he didn't ask for. But by winning, and it was, as Healey put it, by the width of his eyebrow, 50.4%, he managed to keep growing numbers of people leaving to join the newly formed SDP. He gave moderates hope. And I think two of Healey's great achievements was protecting the British economy and saving the Labour Party at a critical time, and giving moderates a continued voice within the two main party structure. After the heavy landslide defeat of Labour in 1983, Healey quit the deputy leadership. But he stayed on as Shadow Foreign Secretary under Kinnock, but resigned from the front bench in 1987 and stood down as an MP in 1992 and entered the Lords. He continued to speak on public affairs and he was still active. I remember on his 90th birthday at the House of Lords, he gave a talk to the Labour History Group, and Gordon Brown had just become Prime Minister, or was about to, and I remember I was there and I asked him what he thought of a Brown leadership. And he gave us several positive things that he thought would happen. And I forget that, but what I do remember is he then added, well, you have to also remember Macmillan's maxim, events, dear boy, events, which I think in politics we all need to remember. The unexpected can nearly always happen, and we need to be prepared for the unexpected. In few months before he died, he backed Yvette Cooper for the Labour leadership, and he died a few weeks after Corbyn became leader at the age of 98. From 1938, when he first got involved in the major scene politics, to supporting Yvette Cooper in the 2015 Labour leadership election, shows tremendous breadth of time in his involvement in the Labour Party. And he was someone who was an acolyte of Ernie Bevin in the late 1940s as well. Incredible long career. But I think it was what stopped him from getting power was his robustious attitude, which I think was his asset in taking things on, but also his Achilles heel in that it repelled people who could have been useful allies at a critical time. But he helped save the economy, and he helped save the Labour Party. And that's why he's one of my political heroes. Plus, I liked him. I found him witty and amusing, and I'm glad I met him. And that's basically it.